Picture this. You step off the plane in Saudi Arabia with just $600 in your pocket, and within hours, you're dining in a marble-clad restaurant that would cost you $200 back home, staying in accommodation that rivals five-star hotels, and witnessing a culture so rich and complex that everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down. This isn't just another travel story. This is about discovering a kingdom that's rewriting its own rules while you watch, where ancient Bedouin traditions dance with futuristic skyscrapers, and where your biggest culture shock might not be what you expect. Welcome to Saudi Arabia, a land where contradictions don't just coexist, they create magic. You'll find yourself in a country where you can buy gold cheaper than groceries, where hospitality isn't just a custom but a sacred duty, and where the same city that houses centuries-old souks is building a vertical city that defies gravity. Your $600 does not just stretch here, it transforms into an experience that feels impossible anywhere else on Earth. But here's what nobody tells you about Saudi Arabia. It's not the country you think it is. The media paints one picture, but step into the bustling cafes of Riyadh at midnight, watch families sharing meals that could feed armies, or witness the genuine warmth in people's eyes when they invite a complete stranger, you, into their world. And you'll realize you've been looking at this kingdom through the wrong lens entirely. The real Saudi Arabia is about to surprise you in ways that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Middle East. And speaking of surprises, let's talk about where exactly you've landed. Saudi Arabia isn't just big, it's mind-bogglingly massive, stretching across 830,000 square miles of the Arabian Peninsula, making it roughly 4 times the size of France. You're standing at the crossroads of 3 continents, where Africa meets Asia and Europe feels just a short flight away. This isn't just geography. It's the reason why Saudi Arabia has been a melting pot of cultures, trade routes, and civilizations for thousands of years. Imagine driving from the northern borders where Jordan and Iraq meet, down to the southern mountains of Asir that touch Yemen. You'd cross landscapes so diverse they feel like different planets. The Empty Quarter, or Rub al-Khali, is the largest continuous sand desert in the world, a sea of golden dunes that stretches beyond the horizon like something from another world. But just hours away, you'll find yourself in Jeddah, a coastal city where the Red Sea crashes against ancient coral reefs and the air smells of salt, spices, and possibility. Then there's Riyadh, the beating heart of this kingdom, where your $600 journey truly begins to make sense. This city of 7 million people rose from desert sands to become a metropolis that rivals Dubai, yet maintains a distinctly Saudi character. Glass towers reach toward the sky like prayers, while traditional markets sprawl at their feet, creating an urban landscape that's both futuristic and timeless. The King Salman Park alone is larger than Central Park, and it's just one of dozens of mega projects reshaping the city's skyline every single day. But perhaps the most audacious vision is NEOM, a $500 billion futuristic city being carved out of the northwestern desert. Picture a linear city 170 kilometers long, powered entirely by renewable energy, where robots outnumber humans and the temperature is controlled by artificial intelligence. This isn't science fiction. It's Saudi Arabia's 2030 vision in action, a complete reimagining of what a country can become when oil wealth meets unlimited ambition. The story of how Saudi Arabia got here reads like an Arabian Nights tale, but with oil derricks instead of magic lamps. Less than a century ago, this was a collection of Bedouin tribes living in one of Earth's harshest environments. Then, in 1938, American geologists struck black gold in Dammam, and everything changed. The kingdom that once survived on dates, camels, and pilgrimage fees suddenly found itself sitting on a quarter of the world's oil reserves. King Abdulaziz Al Saud united the tribes and founded modern Saudi Arabia in 1932, but it was his sons who transformed oil into infrastructure, education, and global influence. Today, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is writing the next chapter, One where Saudi Arabia doesn't just export oil, it exports entertainment, technology, and tourism. The country that once banned cinemas now hosts international film festivals. The kingdom that restricted women's movement now has female Formula One drivers racing through its streets. Now, let's dive into what daily life actually feels like in this rapidly changing kingdom, because this is where your $600 budget starts to reveal its true power. Wake up in Riyadh at 6 a.m., and you'll hear something that has shaped Saudi life for 14 centuries. The call to prayer echoing across the city from thousands of minarets. But don't expect everything to stop like in a movie. Modern Saudi life has learned to flow around these 5 daily prayers, creating a rhythm that's both spiritual and surprisingly practical. Your Saudi neighbors are probably sipping their first cup of kahwa, Arabic coffee so strong it could wake the dead, while checking WhatsApp messages and planning their day around prayer times. The work week runs Sunday to Thursday, and by 7 a.m., the highways are packed with SUVs, sedans, and the occasional luxury car that costs more than most people's houses. But here's the thing about Saudi traffic. It moves with a courtesy that might surprise you. Drivers routinely let others merge, pedestrians are given right-of-way, and road rage is remarkably rare for a country with this many cars. Walk through any Saudi neighborhood during the day, and you'll notice something unique about the pace of life. Yes, it's hot, sometimes hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk, but Saudis have mastered the art of desert living. Shopping malls aren't just retail spaces, they're climate-controlled community centers where families spend entire afternoons. The mall culture here is intense, with complexes so large they have their own postal codes and transportation systems. Family life in Saudi Arabia operates on a scale that might boggle Western minds. It's not uncommon for 3 generations to live in the same compound, and family gatherings regularly involve 50 or more relatives. Friday afternoons transform into massive family reunions where cousins, uncles, aunts, and grandparents gather for meals that last hours. The concept of nuclear family exists, but it's woven into a larger fabric of extended relationships that provide social security, business networks, and emotional support that no government program could match. For expats living here, and there are millions of them, daily life means navigating between their home culture and Saudi customs with varying degrees of success. Western expats often live in compounds that feel like suburban America dropped into the desert, complete with swimming pools, tennis courts, and weekend barbecues. But step outside those compounds, and you're immediately immersed in a culture where relationships matter more than schedules, where honor is more valuable than money, and where hospitality isn't just expected. It's a sacred duty. The gender dynamics that make headlines globally play out very differently in daily life than you might expect. Yes, there are still separate sections in restaurants and some cultural expectations around interaction between unrelated men and women. But watch Saudi families in malls, parks, or restaurants, and you'll see couples shopping together, families enjoying outings, and women making decisions, conducting business and living lives that are far more complex and nuanced than any news report could capture. And speaking of complexity, let's talk about what happens when you're actually hungry in Saudi Arabia, because this is where your budget starts to work absolute magic. Saudi hospitality isn't just a cultural trait. It's a spiritual practice that transforms every meal into a potential feast and every encounter into a memory you'll carry forever. Walk into any Saudi home as a guest, and you'll understand why Arabic has 17 different words for hospitality. Before you can even sit down, you'll have a small glass cup of kahwa pressed into your hands. Not the coffee you know, but a cardamom-scented, lightly caffeinated elixir served from ornate brass pots that have been passed down through generations. Alongside it, you'll find dates so sweet and tender they taste like nature's candy. And these are not just snacks. They're the opening ceremony of what's about to be an epic culinary journey. The national dish, kabsa, is more than rice and meat. It's a celebration on a plate. Picture perfectly spiced basmati rice colored golden with saffron. tender lamb or chicken that falls off the bone, and a blend of spices that includes cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, and black lime that creates flavors you didn't know existed. When Saudis make kabsa for guests, they don't make portions, they make proclamations. A single pot can easily feed 15 people, and that's considered a small family meal. But here's where your $600 budget becomes almost surreal. The same kabsa that costs $3 at a local restaurant would cost you $30 in London or New York. Street food is even more dramatic. A shawarma stuffed with enough meat and vegetables to constitute a full meal costs about $2. Falafel, hummus, fresh bread, and salad combinations run about $1.50. You could eat like a king for $15 a day. And we're talking about fresh, high-quality ingredients prepared by chefs who learned their craft from their grandmothers. The bread alone deserves its own documentary. In Saudi Arabia, bread isn't just food. It's treated with religious reverence. If you see a piece of bread on the ground, you'll often watch Saudis carefully pick it up and place it somewhere respectful, because wasting bread is considered deeply offensive. The flatbreads are baked fresh throughout the day, and you can smell the ovens from blocks away. When it's still warm and paired with fresh hummus, olive oil, and za'atar, it becomes a meal that satisfies both body and soul. Then there's the meat culture, which operates on a scale that might shock you. Camel meat isn't just exotic food for tourists, it's a delicacy that's actually healthier than beef, lower in cholesterol, and incredibly flavorful when prepared correctly. A camel meat sandwich costs about $4, and it's enough food for 2 meals. Goat, lamb, and chicken are prepared in ways that extract every possible flavor, often slow-cooked in underground ovens or over open fires that give the meat a smoky complexity that is impossible to replicate. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Saudi food culture is the communal eating tradition. Meals are served on large platters placed in the center of the table, and everyone eats with their hands from the same dish. This isn't just about food, it's about trust, intimacy, and the belief that sharing a meal creates bonds that last forever. When a Saudi family invites you to eat with them, they're not just offering food, they're offering membership in their extended family. And let's talk about those food markets, because this is where your budget becomes almost comical in its purchasing power. The traditional souks sell spices in quantities that would stock a restaurant, fresh produce that was growing yesterday, and dried fruits and nuts that taste like concentrated sunshine. A bag of dates that would cost $20 in an American health food store costs $3 here. Saffron, that most precious of spices, costs a fraction of international prices. You could stock a kitchen with enough ingredients to cook for months, and still have money left over for dinner. Now, while we're talking about things that might surprise you, let's address the elephant in the room. Those rules and laws that make international headlines and create more misunderstanding than almost any other aspect of Saudi life. The reality is far more nuanced, rapidly changing, and often completely different from what you've read online. Let's start with the dress code, because this is usually the first concern tourists have. For men, the rules are surprisingly relaxed. Long pants and a shirt with sleeves will get you into 99% of places without any issues. Shorts are acceptable in malls, restaurants, and tourist areas, though you might get some curious looks in more traditional neighborhoods. The key is reading the room. If you're visiting a mosque or a traditional souk, longer pants show respect and help you blend in. For women, the abaya requirement for non-Saudis was officially lifted in 2019, and the change has been dramatic. You'll see female tourists in regular Western clothing throughout Riyadh, Jeddah, and other major cities without any issues. Conservative dress is still appreciated, covering shoulders and knees, but the black abaya is no longer mandatory for visitors. Many women choose to wear one anyway because it's actually practical in the desert heat and helps avoid unwanted attention, but it's become a choice rather than a requirement. The gender segregation rules that make headlines are also evolving rapidly. Yes, some restaurants still have family sections and bachelor sections, but mixed seating is increasingly common, especially in international hotel restaurants and upscale establishments. The key is understanding that these aren't necessarily legal requirements anymore. They're often cultural preferences maintained by individual businesses. As a tourist, you can usually ask to sit wherever you're comfortable, and most places will accommodate you. Here's what's really changing that nobody talks about. The entertainment scene has exploded beyond recognition. Saudi Arabia now hosts international concerts, comedy shows, sporting events, and cultural festivals that would have been unimaginable just 5 years ago. Mariah Carey, John Travolta, and dozens of other international stars have performed in Riyadh. The country has movie theaters showing the latest Hollywood blockbusters and theme parks that rival anything in Orlando. The alcohol ban remains in place, but the social scene has adapted in ways that might surprise you. Coffee culture is massive, with cafes staying open until 2 a.m. and serving as social hubs where people gather, work, and socialize. Mocktails have been elevated to an art form, with bars serving alcohol-free cocktails that are genuinely sophisticated. The restaurant scene includes everything from high-end sushi to authentic international cuisine, and the quality often exceeds what you'd find in major Western cities. But here's what tourists really need to know. The rules that matter most are about respect rather than compliance. Taking photos of people without permission is considered rude anywhere in the world, but in Saudi Arabia, it can cause serious offense. Public displays of affection between couples, even married couples, are still frowned upon in many contexts, not because of laws but because of cultural norms. Loud, boisterous behavior that might be acceptable in a London pub could be seen as disrespectful in a Saudi restaurant. The smartphone photography rules deserve special mention because this trips up many visitors. Government buildings, military installations, and some religious sites prohibit photography, which is pretty standard globally. But what catches tourists off guard is that some locals prefer not to be photographed, especially women, and this preference should always be respected. The good news is that most Saudis are incredibly welcoming to tourists and will often volunteer to take photos of you at famous landmarks. One rule that remains firm is drug policy. Saudi Arabia has zero tolerance for illegal drugs, and the penalties are severe. This includes prescription medications that might be legal in your home country but controlled in Saudi Arabia. If you take prescription medication, bring documentation from your doctor and check with the Saudi embassy before traveling. The changing landscape around women's rights deserves deeper exploration, because this is where the gap between perception and reality is often largest. The stories you'll hear from women actually living in or visiting Saudi Arabia are often dramatically different from international media coverage. The guardianship system, which required women to get male permission for everything from travel to medical procedures, has been systematically dismantled over the past 5 years. Saudi women can now obtain passports, travel abroad, register births and divorces, and access government services without guardian approval. They can attend sporting events, drive cars, start businesses, and live independently in ways that were unimaginable just a decade ago. For female tourists and expats, the practical implications are significant. You can rent a car and drive yourself around the country, something that was impossible until 2018. You can book your own hotel room, eat in restaurants alone, and move around cities independently without any legal restrictions. Many female travelers report feeling safer in Saudi cities than in major Western metropolises, partly because crime rates are genuinely low, and partly because there's a cultural emphasis on protecting and respecting women that manifests in everyday interactions. The dating scene is complex and rapidly evolving. Traditional Saudi culture doesn't include Western-style dating, but that doesn't mean romance doesn't exist. It just takes different forms. Family introductions, social gatherings, and increasingly social media connections play major roles in how people meet. Dating apps like Tinder and Bumble are used by many young Saudis, though often more discreetly than in Western countries. Female expats often find themselves navigating between different cultural expectations depending on their workplace and social circle. In international companies and expat communities, professional and social interactions closely resemble those in Western countries. In more traditional Saudi environments, there might be more formal protocols around gender interactions, but these are usually explained clearly and are more about courtesy than restriction. The workforce participation of Saudi women has increased dramatically, with women now making up over 35% of the workforce compared to less than 20% just 5 years ago. You'll find female doctors, engineers, lawyers, business owners, and government officials at every level. The University of Princess Noura, the world's largest women's university, produces graduates in fields from computer science to Islamic law, and these women are reshaping Saudi society from within. What's particularly interesting is how these changes are being driven as much by Saudi women themselves as by government policy. The women's rights movement in Saudi Arabia isn't imported from the West. It's deeply rooted in Islamic principles and Saudi culture, led by Saudi women who understand their society's values and are working to expand opportunities within that framework. The nightlife scene, while different from Western cities, has its own vibrant character that reflects Saudi culture's emphasis on family and community. Instead of bars and clubs, Saudis have created sophisticated coffee culture, family entertainment complexes, and cultural events that extend well into the evening hours. Speaking of culture, let's dive into the traditions and celebrations that reveal the true heart of Saudi society, because this is where you'll understand what makes this kingdom unique beyond its oil wealth and modern ambitions. Saudi culture isn't just preserved in museums. It's lived, breathed, and celebrated with an intensity that transforms ordinary days into memorable experiences. The Islamic calendar shapes the rhythm of Saudi celebrations, and witnessing Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha in Saudi Arabia is like experiencing New Year's Eve, Christmas, and Thanksgiving rolled into one massive celebration. During Eid, the entire country essentially shuts down for 3 days while families gather for meals that could feed small armies, children receive gifts and money from every adult they encounter, and the generosity reaches levels that would bankrupt most Western families. But it's the traditional arts that really showcase Saudi culture's depth and complexity. The Arda, Saudi Arabia's national dance, isn't just performance, it's living history. Picture hundreds of men in traditional white thobes, moving in synchronized formations while chanting poetry that dates back centuries, with swords glinting in the sunlight as they recreate the movements of ancient Bedouin warriors. When you see the Arda performed at National Day celebrations or weddings, you're witnessing an unbroken connection to Saudi Arabia's tribal heritage. The poetry tradition deserves special mention because it's still incredibly alive in Saudi culture. Nabati poetry, composed in the local Arabic dialect, deals with everything from love and loss to politics and social commentary. Poetry competitions draw massive television audiences, and successful poets achieve celebrity status comparable to rock stars in other countries. The meter and rhythm of this poetry influence the traditional music, creating an artistic ecosystem that's uniquely Saudi. Traditional music features instruments you won't find anywhere else. The oud provides melodic foundation, but it's the percussion that creates the driving rhythms. The tabla, reek, and various types of drums create complex polyrhythms that make even non-dancers want to move. During weddings or celebrations, the music can continue for hours, with different family members taking turns leading songs that tell stories, celebrate relationships, or simply express the joy of being together. The craft traditions are equally impressive and surprisingly accessible to visitors. In the traditional souks of Riyadh's Dira district or Jeddah's Al-Balad, you'll find artisans practicing crafts that haven't changed in centuries. Metalworkers create intricate silver jewelry using techniques passed down through generations. Carpet weavers produce rugs so complex they take months to complete, with patterns that encode tribal histories and family genealogies. The traditional architecture, particularly in Jeddah's historic district, showcases an aesthetic that perfectly balances beauty and practicality. The famous Jeddah balconies, with their intricate wooden screens called Roshan, are not just decorative. They're sophisticated climate control systems that allow air to circulate while providing privacy and shade. Walking through Al Balad feels like stepping into a fairy tale, with 4-story coral stone buildings that have withstood centuries of Red Sea humidity and heat. Saudi National Day on September 23rd transforms the entire country into a massive street party. Green flags and decorations appear everywhere. Traditional music plays from every speaker, and the usual reserved Saudi demeanor gives way to celebration that lasts for days. Families drive around cities with flags attached to their cars. Strangers share sweets and coffee, and the sense of national pride is palpable and infectious. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Saudi celebrations is how they maintain Islamic principles while embracing joy and community. Religious festivals aren't solemn occasions. They're joyous celebrations of faith, family, and community that include elaborate meals, gift-giving, charity, and gatherings that strengthen social bonds. The balance between spiritual observance and genuine fun creates celebrations that feel both meaningful and genuinely enjoyable. Now let's get down to the numbers that make your $600 budget not just possible, but surprisingly comfortable. The cost of living in Saudi Arabia varies dramatically depending on your lifestyle choices, but for someone willing to live like a local rather than an expat, $600 can stretch much further than you might imagine. Starting with accommodation, your biggest expense, you have several options that can work within your budget. Traditional hotels in city centers can cost $80 to $150 per night, which would blow your budget immediately. But apartment rentals through local apps like Haraj or even international platforms offer furnished studios in decent neighborhoods for $200 or $300 per month. Hostels are rare, but guest houses and budget hotels in older parts of cities like Jeddah or Dammam can run $15 to $25 per night, making them viable for short-term stays. The real secret is Saudi Arabia's emerging Airbnb market, where local families rent out extra rooms or small apartments at prices that seem almost charitable. A clean, safe room in a family compound might cost $10–15 per night, and often includes access to kitchen facilities and sometimes even meals. This isn't just budget accommodation. It's cultural immersion that money can't buy in most countries. Food costs are where your budget becomes almost comical in its purchasing power. A full meal at a local restaurant, we're talking kabsa with meat, transportation is surprisingly affordable, especially if you use public options. The Riyadh Metro, when fully operational, offers rides for less than $1. Your phone and internet needs can be handled for about $15 to $20 per month with local SIM cards offering generous data packages. Saudi Arabia has excellent 4G and 5G coverage, so staying connected isn't an issue even on a tight budget. The hidden costs that catch many budget travelers are entry fees to attractions, tips, and social obligations, and the occasional need for more formal clothing or cultural items. Major tourist sites like the UNESCO World Heritage Sites might charge $5 or $10 entry fees, which adds up if you're sightseeing heavily. But here's where Saudi hospitality becomes an actual budget line item. You'll be invited to meals, offered rides, and given small gifts so frequently that you'll want to reciprocate, and budgeting $20 to $30 for reciprocal hospitality gifts or treats for people who help you isn't just polite. It's essential for maintaining the relationships that make budget travel possible. The realistic breakdown for living on $600 in Saudi Arabia for a month looks something like this. Accommodation, $200, $250. Food, $150, $200. Transportation, $50, $80. Phone, internet, $20. Attractions and activities, $50. Miscellaneous and gifts, $50, $100. This leaves you with a small buffer for unexpected expenses or opportunities. The key to making this budget work is flexibility and cultural openness. If you're willing to stay in family guest houses, eat local food, use public transportation, and accept invitations rather than always paying for entertainment, $600 becomes not just survivable but genuinely comfortable. Transportation in Saudi Arabia reflects the country's unique geography and car culture in ways that can either make or break your budget, depending on how well you understand the local systems. The kingdom is built for cars. Distances are vast. Summer heat makes walking impractical for much of the year, and fuel is cheaper than bottled water in most countries. Fuel costs about $0.60 per gallon, making driving incredibly affordable if you can rent or borrow a car. Car rental starts around $15 to $20 per day for economy vehicles, and Saudi traffic, despite its reputation, follows predictable patterns once you understand the cultural norms. Saudi drivers are generally courteous, though they drive faster than most Western countries and have a more flexible relationship with lane markings. The Uber and Careem networks in Saudi Arabia are extensive and remarkably affordable. A 30-minute ride across Riyadh during normal hours might cost 46 and surge pricing is less aggressive than in many Western cities. Many drivers speak some English, and they're often excellent sources of local information about restaurants, attractions, and cultural events. Public transportation is rapidly developing, with the Riyadh Metro representing a massive investment in sustainable urban transport. The system includes 6 lines covering 176 kilometers, with stations designed like underground palaces featuring local art and architecture. Once fully operational, the metro will connect major business districts, universities, airports, and residential areas for less than $1 per ride. Intercity transportation offers several budget-friendly options. The Saudi Public Transport Company operates comfortable buses between major cities, with air conditioning, Wi-Fi, and prayer time stops built into the schedule. A bus ticket from Riyadh to Jeddah costs about $15 and takes 10 hours, compared to a flight that costs $60 and takes 90 minutes. The domestic flight network is extensive, with Saudi Arabian Airlines and several budget carriers offering connections between major cities. During off-peak times, you can find flights for $40, $18, making air travel competitive with ground transport when you factor in time savings. For the adventurous, hitchhiking isn't uncommon in rural areas, and Saudis are generally willing to offer rides to respectful travelers. This isn't recommended for solo female travelers, but male travelers often report positive experiences getting rides between smaller towns and tourist sites. The cultural aspect of transportation deserves mention because it affects how you'll navigate social situations. Offering to pay for gas or contribute to transport costs is always appreciated, even if your Saudi host insists it's unnecessary. Many Saudis consider providing transportation to guests a matter of honor, so accepting rides graciously while offering to reciprocate appropriately is an important social skill. Now, let's address the questions that are probably keeping you up at night if you're seriously considering this adventure. Is Saudi Arabia actually safe? What happens if you get sick? And what's life really like for the millions of expats who call this place home? Safety in Saudi Arabia might be the biggest gap between perception and reality. The crime statistics are remarkable. Violent crime rates are among the lowest in the world. Theft is uncommon, and tourists are generally treated with exceptional care and protection. You can walk through major cities at night, leave valuables in your car, and travel between cities without the security concerns you'd have in most countries. The reasons for this safety are cultural and practical. Saudi society places enormous emphasis on hospitality and protecting guests, which extends to tourists. The religious and cultural values that emphasize community responsibility create social pressure that discourages crime. Additionally, the government views tourism as essential to economic diversification, so tourist safety receives significant attention and resources. That said, safety isn't just about crime. It's about understanding and respecting local customs. The vast majority of problems tourists encounter are cultural misunderstandings rather than safety threats. Taking photos of the wrong buildings, dressing inappropriately for certain contexts, or misunderstanding social norms can create awkward situations, but rarely dangerous ones. The healthcare system in Saudi Arabia is surprisingly sophisticated, especially in major cities. The kingdom has invested heavily in medical infrastructure and many doctors trained in Europe or North America. Public hospitals provide emergency care to everyone regardless of citizenship status, though the quality varies significantly between facilities. Private healthcare is excellent and relatively affordable by international standards. A visit to a private clinic for common issues might cost $30 to $50. Prescription medications are widely available and cheap, and dental care is particularly high quality and affordable. Many expats report better healthcare experiences in Saudi Arabia than in their home countries, particularly for routine and preventive care. International health insurance is recommended, not because Saudi healthcare is inadequate, but because emergency evacuation or treatment for serious conditions could be expensive. Most major international insurance companies have agreements with Saudi hospitals and clinics, making billing and payment straightforward. For expat families, the international school system is extensive and generally high quality. Schools following American, British, Indian, Pakistani, and other curricula are available in major cities, though tuition costs can be significant, often $3,000 or $8,000 per year per child. Many expat employment packages include education allowances that help offset these costs. The expat community in Saudi Arabia is massive and diverse, with Indians, Pakistanis, Filipinos, Bangladeshis, Europeans, Americans, and dozens of other nationalities creating multicultural communities within Saudi cities. Expat compounds offer Western-style amenities, international restaurants, social clubs, and community events that help ease cultural transition. Living as an expat in Saudi Arabia often means navigating between your professional life, which might closely resemble working in any international business environment, and your social life, which requires more cultural sensitivity and adaptation. Many expats report that their Saudi colleagues and neighbors become genuine friends who provide cultural guidance, language help, and social connections that enrich their experience far beyond work relationships. The compound lifestyle, while sometimes criticized as creating cultural isolation, serves practical purposes beyond comfort. Compounds provide community support networks, cultural familiarity, and social activities that help expat families adapt gradually to Saudi culture rather than being overwhelmed by immediate total immersion. As your Saudi adventure draws to a close, let's navigate the practical details that determine whether you leave as a frustrated tourist who fought the system, or as someone who cracked the code and discovered the hidden kingdom that most visitors never see. The e-visa system is straightforward and efficient. Most tourists can obtain visas online within 24 to 48 hours for about 80. The visa allows 90 days of stay and is available to citizens of 49 countries, including the US, UK, and most European nations. The requirements are standard: valid passport, return ticket, accommodation booking, and basic personal information. But here's what the visa application doesn't tell you. Download these apps before you arrive, because they'll transform your experience from confusing to seamless. Careem and Uber for transportation, Jahez or Hunger Station for food delivery, Sala or Noon for shopping, and most importantly, Google Translate with Arabic downloaded offline. These aren't conveniences. They're essential tools that bridge cultural and language gaps. Cultural etiquette extends beyond dress codes and public behavior into subtle social interactions that can make or break your experience. When greeting Saudis, men should offer handshakes to other men, but wait for women to extend their hands first. Many Saudi women prefer not to shake hands with unrelated men, and this preference should be respected without taking offense. Eye contact is important with men, but should be limited with women you don't know well. The concept of personal space operates differently in Saudi culture. Saudis often stand closer during conversations than Americans or Northern Europeans might expect, and this indicates warmth and engagement rather than aggression. Similarly, the pace of conversation often includes longer pauses that aren't awkward silences. They're thinking spaces that show respect for the topic being discussed. Gift-giving customs can create beautiful cultural moments if handled correctly. If you're invited to someone's home, bringing small gifts from your home country is appreciated. Think local chocolates, coffee, or items that represent your culture rather than expensive presents that might cause embarrassment. Avoid alcohol, pork products, or items with religious symbols from other faiths, not because they're illegal to possess but because they might cause cultural discomfort. The prayer time schedule affects daily life in ways that tourists should understand and respect. Business hours, restaurant service, and even social gatherings pause during prayer times, and these breaks are non-negotiable cultural moments. Rather than seeing this as inconvenience, smart travelers use prayer times for rest, planning, or quiet reflection. Fighting the rhythm instead of flowing with it guarantees frustration. Photography etiquette goes beyond legal restrictions into cultural sensitivity. Always ask permission before photographing people, especially women, and be prepared for polite refusals that have nothing to do with you personally. Government buildings, military sites, and some religious areas prohibit photography, but the bigger issue is accidentally photographing people who prefer privacy. When in doubt, ask or simply enjoy the moment without capturing it. The tipping culture is modest but appreciated. In restaurants, 10–15% is generous. For service providers like drivers or hotel staff, small tips of $1 to $2 are appropriate. And for exceptional service or hospitality, slightly larger tips show proper appreciation without creating social awkwardness. Money matters require attention because Saudi Arabia is still largely a cash economy outside of major retailers and hotels. ATMs are widespread and reliable. Credit cards are accepted in most tourist-oriented businesses, but having cash for local restaurants, transportation, and small purchases is essential. The Saudi riyal is stable and closely tied to the US dollar, making currency calculations straightforward. Ramadan deserves special mention because visiting during this month requires additional cultural awareness and offers unique opportunities. During daylight hours, eating, drinking, or smoking in public is inappropriate out of respect for those fasting. However, hotels and some restaurants serve non-Muslim guests in designated areas, and the evening iftar meals and late-night social activities during Ramadan offer cultural experiences unavailable at other times. What not to do is often more important than what to do. Don't refuse hospitality aggressively. If someone offers coffee or food multiple times, accept graciously even if you're not hungry or thirsty. Don't point the soles of your feet toward people when sitting. Don't use your left hand for eating or greeting. And don't discuss politics, religion, or regional conflicts unless specifically asked, and even then with considerable caution. The final truth about Saudi Arabia is that it defies every expectation, challenges every assumption, and rewards every open mind that approaches it with curiosity rather than judgment. This isn't the Saudi Arabia of news headlines or political debates. This is a living, breathing, rapidly changing society that's writing its own future while honoring its remarkable past. Your $600 budget revealed more than just financial possibilities. It uncovered a kingdom where ancient hospitality traditions make strangers into family, where desert landscapes hide futuristic cities, and where cultural depth coexists with ambitious modernization. You discovered that the most interesting travel experiences aren't about checking boxes or collecting passport stamps. They're about allowing a place and its people to change your perspective on what's possible in our world. The Saudi Arabia you experienced probably wasn't the one you expected to find. The warmth of the people, the sophistication of the cities, The complexity of the culture and the genuine excitement about sharing their kingdom with curious visitors created something more valuable than any travel experience money could buy. Understanding. This kingdom taught you that every country, every culture, and every people deserved to be understood on their own terms rather than through the filters of media, politics, or preconceptions. Saudi Arabia's story is still being written, and you were privileged to witness a few chapters of that ongoing narrative. The friendships you made, the meals you shared, the conversations that lasted until dawn, and the moments when cultural barriers dissolved into human connection, these weren't just travel memories. They were reminders that our world is far more interesting, complex, and beautiful than any single perspective could capture. As you reflect on your journey, remember that you didn't just visit Saudi Arabia. You participated in its transformation from a closed kingdom to an opening society. Every respectful interaction, every cultural bridge you crossed, and every stereotype you discarded contributed to the larger story of how travel, understanding, and human curiosity can change both visitors and hosts. The kingdom you're leaving isn't the same one you entered, and neither are you. That's the real magic of travel. It changes everyone involved, creating connections that transcend borders, politics, and cultural differences. Saudi Arabia offered you that gift, and in accepting it with an open mind and respectful heart, you became part of its story. Your adventure proved that $600 can buy more than accommodation and meals. It can purchase perspectives, relationships, and understanding that no amount of money could create without the willingness to step outside comfort zones and embrace the unknown. Saudi Arabia taught you that the most valuable currency in travel isn't money. It's curiosity, respect, and the courage to let a place change you. The kingdom will continue evolving, probably in ways that surprise everyone, but the memories you've created and the lessons you've learned will remain part of who you are forever. That's the real return on your $600 investment. Not just what you experienced, but who you became through experiencing it. And perhaps most importantly, you now carry with you the responsibility that comes with authentic travel experience. The ability to share nuanced, respectful, and honest perspectives about a place and people that too often exist only in headlines and stereotypes. Your story, your memories, and your transformed understanding become bridges that help others approach Saudi Arabia, and perhaps other unfamiliar places with the same openness and curiosity that made your journey possible. Comment below if you're ready to discover the Saudi Arabia that's waiting behind the headlines. And remember, the best travel experiences aren't about the money you spend, but about the assumptions you're willing to leave behind.